There are few topics in the history of the American Old West that are as legendary or brutal than the decades-long struggle between the Texas Rangers and the lords of the Southern Plains, the Comanche. Being relatively new inhabitants of what we now call Texas, the Comanche were originally a branch of the Northern Shoshone tribe. They were constantly being pushed south by more powerful and better armed tribes like the Crow and the Blackfoot. Sometime in the late 1600s, these ancestors of who we now know as the Comanche were introduced to the horse, and they rapidly evolved into a powerful horse warrior tribe. It was only after their arrival to the Southern Plains that these people were given the name Comanche. It comes from the Ute word Comanchesia and translates to anyone who wants to fight me all the time. The Comanche quickly became an unstoppable power in the Southern Plains, all the way from Kansas and parts of eastern Colorado down to the deserts of northern Mexico. With their coming, the Comanche pushed the various Apache tribes off the plains almost completely. The two peoples became bitter enemies. They also wreaked havoc on the local Texas tribes, including the Tonkawa, Caddo, and many more. The Comanche weren't the first tribe to be introduced to the horse, but they were the first to fight almost exclusively from horseback. In a quote from William Blakemore, a man who spent 8 years living with the Comanche, "On foot, slow and awkward, but on horseback, graceful. They are the most expert and daring riders in the world. In battle, they sweep down upon their enemies with terrific yells, and concealing the whole body, with the exception of 1 foot behind their horses, discharge bullets or arrows over and under the animal's neck and accurately." The Comanche were virtually invincible for years, until the mid-1800s, when the Texas Rangers, after years of fruitlessly chasing the Comanche, acquired a new weapon, the 5-shot Colt revolver. This allowed the Rangers to fight like Comanche. This new pistol allowed the Rangers to fire multiple times from horseback without having to stop or slow down to reload, much like the Comanche, who could hit an enemy with multiple arrows in the time it took to reload a gun. This is a brief and simplified history of the Comanche people, but for now I'm going to move on to today's story. This story is from the book Eyewitness to the Old West, compiled by Richard Scott, and it is the first-hand account of a Texas Ranger named James Pike. Pike was raised in Ohio and Missouri. His year of birth is uncertain, but he came to Texas in 1859 and joined the Texas Rangers, where he took part in numerous campaigns against the Comanche. In this particular encounter, Pike and a number of Texas Rangers were allied with some Caddo warriors, under a chief called Casa Maria. The Caddo being a tribe who traditionally lived in parts of Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Texas. The Caddo and Comanche had a complex relationship, sometimes being trade partners and even fighting against the Apache together. But occasionally tensions would rise over trade or territorial disputes, and the two tribes would become rivals. It was very common for the Texas Rangers to ally themselves with various native tribes when fighting against the Comanche, most notably the Tonkawa and Lipan Apache, but also the Delaware, Caddo, Waco, and many others. This was advantageous to both parties, as both the Rangers and the natives were able to strengthen the manpower of their party when striking against the hated and extremely formidable Comanche. It was also invaluable for the Rangers to have native scouts who were familiar with the vast plains of Texas. The Rangers and Caddo were on the hunt for Comanches, and their scouts had alerted them to a war party of 40 Comanches nearby. This being the case, the men set an ambush. The men took cover behind rocks, bushes, and small trees, and using a common Plains Indian tactic, one the legendary Lakota Crazy Horse was famous for using against the United States Army, the Rangers sent 2 men forward as a lure to be seen by the Comanche. The Comanche, seeing the 2 men and eager to take advantage of the easy target, charged full speed after the men, straight towards the ambush. As the Comanche neared rifle range, Casa Maria, using an eagle bone whistle, blew a long low note followed by 3 quick short notes. Instantly, the Caddo released a deadly volley into the flank of the still charging Comanche, killing men and horses alike. But the main body of Comanches were able to rally and return fire. Although exposed with no cover, the Comanche rode back and forth, taking turns riding forward to shoot at the Rangers and Caddos before riding out of rifle range to reload. So the battle went. But upon a command by Casa Maria, the Caddos leapt from their cover, shortly followed by the Rangers, and charged with pistols, rifles, bows, and lances. The men charged at the still-mounted Comanche, screaming wildly with arrows and bullets flying through the air. A hand-to-hand battle was imminent. But just before the two parties clashed, the Comanches, knowing they could not hold, retreated on their horses. Left behind were 7 dead and 9 wounded Comanches. As was standard practice in plains warfare, none were spared. The wounded Comanches struggled desperately with their lances and bows while chanting their death songs, but all were either shot or tomahawked by Caddo warriors. The 16 killed Comanches were all then scalped, the scalps being hung from the belts and horses of the Caddos as trophies of war. The gruesome business concluded, the Caddos and Rangers, satisfied with their results, saddled up and rode towards home. For several miles they rode in a single column, and one by one the Caddo warriors would break from the line and take their own route to a predetermined meeting spot, a common tactic used to make it difficult for any avenging Comanche to track them. Now, there are some details missing from this story, notably the date of the battle, the number of Caddos and Rangers present, and whether or not any of them were killed, and the level of participation of James Pike himself. But this is the first-hand account of James Pike, and that is simply all the information we are given. Without personal narratives of the men and women who lived in the past, a lot more of these stories would be lost forever. As for the rest of James Pike's life, when the Civil War broke out, he went north to fight for the Union. He served as a spy and scout. He was captured by the Confederates, but later escaped. After the war, he was commissioned as a first lieutenant in the U.S. Cavalry. In 1865, he recorded some of his life experiences in the book The Scout and Ranger, being the personal adventures of Corporal Pike of the 4th Ohio Cavalry. And in 1867, he was involved in an Indian battle against an unnamed tribe, during which his gun jammed. He grew frustrated and slammed his gun into a boulder, causing it to go off, killing him.